Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you in the core course of week 5, and thank you for coming to this presentation of a poem around the house. I'm Candace Stover. I teach writing and literature, and the first thing that I need to request is that you please turn off, Elmer, all electronic devices. Everyone, that is, except for Zach, who's in the sound booth. Because this is the presentation where you are the PowerPoint. And I really mean that. I need to request that you turn off all electronic devices for this presentation. I'm not going to do cartwheels or interpretive dance, but I wish I could. You are the PowerPoint for this presentation. You, your imagination, and the words of poetry that I'm going to share with you. It's inside you where the words and images of these poems will or won't come to life. I want to talk with you this afternoon about how poetry can enrich your life as a human ecologist. Gesundheit. And to help me do that, I'm going to read some poems that I believe in and return to from among the many, many, many poems and poets that I believe in and return to for the beauty of their language and music, for the clarity and resonance of their images, for their mystery, their simplicity, and their depth. I'm trying to figure this out so that I can not lose some eye contact with those of you who are above. I always like to sit up there too. Because sometimes, and I think many of you will recognize this, what appears most simple and essential in its nature is at the same time something that draws us back again and again. Something we return to as a way of finding more about the world we live in, our place in it, who we are at the core, and what we want to do with the time that we have here. The first poem that I'm going to read to you is called The Art of Disappearing by Naomi Shihab Nye, Palestinian-American poet. I have copies of these if people would like, if you fall in love with one of these poems, please come up at the end, and I'm happy to give it to you. There are also people, very kind volunteers floating around who have paper and pencil, and just wave if you need some. I've got some people ready to do that. So, The Art of Disappearing by Naomi Shihab Nye. When they say, "Don't I know you?" say, "No." When they invite you to the party, remember what parties are like before answering. Someone telling you in a loud voice they once wrote a poem. Greasy sausage balls on a paper plate. Then reply. If they say, "We should get together," say, "Why?" It's not that you don't love them anymore. You're trying to remember something too important to forget. Trees, the monastery bell at twilight. Tell them you have a new project. It will never be finished. When someone recognizes you in a grocery store, nod briefly and become a cabbage. When someone you haven't seen in 10 years appears at the door, don't start singing him all your new songs. You will never catch up. Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any second. Then decide what to do with your time. The first thing that you might want to do, if everybody's got paper and pencil that needs it, is to draw a triangle and put the word poet or poetry in the center of it. Then, at each point of the triangle, please put one of these 3 words. I see, do you want paper? Yeah. Where are my paper people? Yeah, please don't be shy about waving if you would like to do that. Okay, so you've drawn a triangle. You've got the word poet or poetry in the middle of it. Then, at each point of the triangle, please put one of these 3 words. Moments, worlds, words. The poet Mary Oliver uses slightly different language for what's at the point of the triangle, at each point of the triangle. She defines the 3 ingredients of poetry this way: the mystery of the universe, spiritual curiosity, the energy of language. I'm going to ask for your patience as I say these three ingredients of poetry from Mary Oliver again. The mystery of the universe, spiritual curiosity, the energy of language. How does each of these, I wonder, touch and appear in your life and how you go about living it today? Here are some lines I keep on my desk at home from Robert Cording's Gratitude. He's thankful even for a small anthill and for the ants that are all purpose and clear decision, for the 2 lime trees that mumble audibly with the workings of bees in June, and especially for the warm laying on of sun that tells him he's a man created of earth and not of air and thoughts. Cording attends to an anthill, 2 lime trees, the sound of bees in June, and how the sun feels. Attend, attention. What does it mean to attend? To be present. Here's a quotation from the French mystic, spiritual activist, and philosopher Simone Weil, W-E-I-L, Weil, that I've mused on and returned to for many years. Absolute attention is prayer. To what do you or I or we give absolute attention in a world that seems bent on speed, fragmentation, and proliferating invitations to distraction? This is, I think, a good question for an ecologist. Annie Dillard, ecologist, naturalist, essayist, novelist, and yes, poet, puts it this way: how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And then she attends to the making of this poem. Mornings like this, from David Grayson's The Countryman's Year, 1936. Sunday, what still sunny days we have now, and I alone in them, so brief, are best. So much is wrong, but not my hills. I have been thinking of writing a letter to the President of China. Do it, do it, do it. I beseech you, I beseech you, I beseech you, I beseech you. Mornings like this, I look about the earth and the heavens. There is not enough to believe. Mornings like this. How heady the morning air, how sharp and sweet and clear the morning air. Authentic winter, the odor of campfires, beans 18 inches long, a billion chances, and I am here. And here I lie in the quiet room and read and read and read. So easy, so easy, so easy. Pools in old woods, full of leaves. Give me time enough in this place, and I will surely make a beautiful thing. What, in this teeming, fragile world, do and will each of us attend to, be present for, and how do we choose? The poet attends to how we work with words. I'd like to ask you to write down in your own hand a 9-line poem from the Polish poet Czesław Miłosz. Don't worry, I double-check the spelling of his name every time I use it. I really do. For a while, I just called him Coleslaw. Here's how you spell his first name, Czesław. C, unless we've got a good Polish person here, C-Z-E-S-L-A-W. C-Z-E-S-L-A-W, Czesław. And Miłosz, M-I-L-O-S-Z, M-I-L-O-S-Z. The title of the Miłosz poem that you're going to write is Encounter, E-N-C-O-U-N-T-E-R. I'll read each line twice, including where you need capital letters and punctuation. please don't even try to figure out anything about, oh, what does it mean, or what's going on with this poem, or anything like that right now. I really just want you to take the language of the poem down in your own hand so that you can feel that process happening. Encounter. So you should have, line 1, capital W. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn, period. Line 1, capital W. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn, period. Line 2, capital A. A red wing rose in the darkness, period. A red wing rose in the darkness, period. Skip a line, please, because we're going on to another stanza. Is that a good pace? Give me a signal. Is that a good pace? Yeah? Okay. Line 3, capital A. And suddenly a hare, H-A-R-E, and suddenly a hare ran across the road, period. And suddenly a hare ran across the road, period. Line 4. One of us, capital O, one of us pointed to it with his hand, period. One of us pointed to it with his hand, period. Capital O, period at the end. Skip a line again, please. Line 5, capital T. That was long ago, period. Capital T. Today, neither of them is alive, comma. Line 5. That was long ago, period. Capital T. Today, neither of them is alive, comma. Line 6, capital N. Not the hare, H-A-R-E, comma. Not the hare, comma, nor the man who made the gesture, period. Not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture, comma, after hare, period at the end of the line. Skip a line again, please. Line 7. O, just the letter O, not O-H, just the letter O. Oh, my love, comma. Where are they, comma? Where are they going? Line 7, capital O. Oh, my love, comma. Where are they, comma? Where are they going? Line 8, capital T. The flash of a hand, comma. Streak of movement, comma. Rustle of pebbles, period. Capital T, the flash of a hand, comma. Streak of movement, comma. Rustle of pebbles, period. Line 9. I ask not out of sorrow, comma. I ask not out of sorrow, comma, but in wonder, period. So you should have 9 lines, 3 2-line stanzas, with 1 3-line stanza to close it. What in this encounter, this moment of absolute attention, that engages Miłosz enough to write this poem? And what are some of the things he attended to in the process of creating it, of transforming this moment from the world into the words of poetry? I'm going to read the poem out to you right now. I hope with some inflection. Just think, you just wrote a Czechoslovakian Miłosz poem. That's not bad. People would kill for that. Encounter. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive, not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask, not out of sorrow, but in wonder. There are many things I love about this poem. I love how simple and direct it is. I love how it paints a picture and takes me to a place I've never been, to this particular combination of frozen fields, a wagon at dawn, and a red wing in the darkness. I love that Miłosz chose the single letter O versus the more familiar O, O-H, and that even into his 90s, he was curious about the difference between these two words and wrote about that with another poet and translator, Robert Haas. What is the energy of language Miłosz is after with this round, solitary O? I notice, too, that the speaker of this poem is not alone, but recalling this moment years later to someone he loves. Oh, my love. How does this conversation between the lovers unfold? Is it perhaps another kind of encounter? I also love the beauty of flash, streak, rustle, the music of these words, and how vividly and quickly they move and exist in time. And most especially, I love that Miłosz has this speaker distinguish very definitely. I ask not out of sorrow, but in wonder. Wonder. Spiritual curiosity, the mystery of the universe, again. This is not just nostalgia or some vague, moony longing for a time gone by. It is a moment returned to and rooted in wonder. Poetry roots itself in that wonder. Just where do those vivid moments, gestures, memories, mornings of our lives go? And how does the poet, another kind of ecologist, commit to saving and sustaining them on the page? Those of you who write or have written poems know it is a commitment to see the poem through its changes and needs. It is a solitary act of attention between the writer and the words, a question of exactly what one believes is and is not worth saving to render a moment of value. Oliver describes revision as an almost endless task, but endlessly fascinating too, and especially in the early years, a process, she says, when much is learned. She also says this: I like to say that I write poems for a stranger who will be born in some distant country hundreds of years from now. This is a useful notion, especially during revision. It reminds me forcefully that everything necessary must be on the page. I must make a complete poem, a river swimming poem, a mountain climbing poem. Not my poem, if it is well done, but a deeply breathing, bounding, self-sufficient poem. Like a traveler in an uncertain land, it needs to carry with it all that it must have to sustain its life, and not a lot of extra weight either. To sustain its own life, what motivates us to protect, revise, investigate, celebrate, mourn, wonder at, and return to the world in words? I'm going to read you a poem of Oliver's called Singapore. Singapore. In Singapore, in the airport, a darkness was ripped from my eyes. In the women's restroom, one compartment stood open. A woman knelt there, washing something in the white bowl. Disgust argued in my stomach, and I felt in my pocket for my ticket. A poem should always have birds in it. Kingfishers say, with their bold eyes and gaudy wings. Rivers are pleasant, and of course, trees. A waterfall, or if that's not possible, a fountain rising and falling. A person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. When the woman turned, I could not answer her face. Her beauty and her embarrassment struggled together, and neither could win. She smiled, and I smiled. What kind of nonsense is this? Everybody needs a job. Yes, a person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. But first, we must watch her as she stares down at her labor, which is dull enough. She is washing the tops of the airport ashtrays, as big as hubcaps, with a blue rag. Her small hands turn the metal, scrubbing and rinsing. She does not work slowly, nor quickly, but like a river. Her dark hair is like the wing of a bird. I don't doubt for a moment that she loves her life. And I want her to rise up from the crust and the slop and fly down to the river. This probably won't happen, but maybe it will. If the world were only pain and logic, who would want it? Of course, it isn't. Neither do I mean anything miraculous, but only the light that can shine out of a life. I mean the way she unfolded and refolded the blue cloth, the way her smile was only for my sake. I mean the way this poem is filled with trees and birds. The poems and poets we encounter when we meet and connect with their words, or when their words find and reach us, add to the world we live in. They take us to Singapore. They take us to a boat in the forest. This is Thomas Lux. It's called A Boat in the Forest. 60 miles from a lake, no river or pond within 48, no ocean near, and this rowboat, crisply painted, oarlocks oiled, oars set and cocked in a small, mossy, pine needles clearing of spare gray and yellow forest grass. The light here, like joy, pain, like glass. On its bow, in red paint, beside the anchor rope, its name, a joy to be hidden, but a disaster not to be found. An odd name, an odd place, a long name for a boat. Poems can also take us into someone's dream. This is Philip Booth. Dreamscape. On the steep road curving to town, up through spruce trees, from the filled-in canal, there have been 5 houses, always. But when I sleep, the whole left side of the blacktop clears itself into good pasture. There are 2 old horses tethered, and a curving row of miniature bison kneeling, each with his 2 front hooves tucked in neatly under the lip of the asphalt. I am asleep. I cannot explain it. I do not want to explain it. They take us into grief. This is Elizabeth Bishop's One Art. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost, that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day. Accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. Poems also celebrate. Will one of the students who speaks Spanish come up here with me, please? I know there are some of you out there. Will you? No? Yes, maybe? Maybe. Good. I really hope you're not trying to figure out what these poems in quotation marks mean. What I really hope you're doing is letting the language of the poems wash over you, and when the language hits you in a good place, enjoy that, because that's really how you come to poetry first. It's not meant to be something labored over, pondered, dissected, chopped up into tiny little bits so that you don't know what it is anymore. The poet wants to talk to us. The poet wants us to hear the language of the music. Angelique, yeah? Yeah? We can do this together. Okay. This is Neruda, who wrote a lot of odes. You may know that an ode is a song. And the odes were shaped like his country. From Chile. Long, skinny, beautiful odes. He wrote so many odes to so many things. Ode to a tuna in the market, ode to a bar of soap, ode to a gillyfish, ode to a table, ode to a loaf of bread. You get the idea that this man that was in this country, there was so much sorrow, so much brutality, and he was getting up singing about something every day. Ode to this, right? Ode to a bar of soap, ode to the tomatoes. This is called Ode to a Pair of Socks. So, do this part for me, please. I wanted you to hear this in this language. Yeah. This to hear, and then I'll come in English.
Okay. Me trajo Maru Mori un par de calcetines que trajo con sus manos de pastora, 2 calcetines suaves como liebres. En ellos metí los pies como en 2 estuches tejidos con hebras del crepúsculo y pelejo de ovejas.
Very good. We'll do it in pairs, okay? I'm going to do the next part in English, okay? Ode to a Pair of Socks. Maru Mori brought me a pair of socks that she knit with her shepherd's hands. 2 socks as soft as rabbit fur. I thrust my feet inside them as if they were 2 little boxes from threads of sunset and sheepskin. The next little one, yeah.
Violentos calcetines, mis pies fueron 2 pescados de lana, 2 largos tubulones de azul ultramarino atravesados por una tranza de oro.
My feet were 2 woolen fish in those outrageous socks, 2 gangly navy blue sharks impaled on a golden thread.
2 gigantescos milos, 2 cañones, mis pies fueron honrados de este modo por estos celestiales calcetines. Eran tan hermosos que por primera vez mis pies me parecieron inaceptables, como 2 decrépitos bomberos indignos de aquel fuego bordado de aquellos luminosos calcetines.
Two giant blackbirds, two cannons. Thus were my feet honored by those heavenly socks. They were so beautiful, I found my feet unlovable for the very first time, like two crusty old firemen, firemen unworthy of that embroidered fire, those incandescent socks. Oh, okay.
Sin embargo, resistí la tentación aguda de guardarlos, como los colegiales preservan las luciérnagas, como los eruditos coleccionan documentos sagrados. Resistí el impulso furioso de ponerlos en una jaula de oro y darles cada día.
Nevertheless, I fought the sharp temptation to put them away, the way schoolboys put fireflies in a bottle, the way scholars hoard Holy Writ. I fought the mad urge to lock them in a golden cage and feed them birdseed.
Alpiste y pulpa de melón rosado, como descubridores que en la selva entregan el rarísimo venado verde, el asador, y se lo comen con remordimiento. Estiré los pies y me enfude los bellos calcetines y luego los zapatos. Y es esta, la moral de mi oda, 2 veces es belleza, la belleza, y lo que es bueno es doblemente bueno, como se trata de 2 calcetines de lana en el invierno.
And morsels of pink melon every day. Like jungle explorers who deliver a young deer of the rarish species to the roasting spit, then wolf it down in shame, I stretched my feet forward and pulled on those gorgeous socks, and over them my shoes. So this is the moral of my ode. Beauty is beauty, twice over, and good things are doubly good when you are talking about a pair of wool socks in the dead of winter. Thank you very much. Will you please give her a hand?
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to take a copy of the poem? Yeah, okay. Well, I could read these poems, many of these poems, all day long. There are lots of them, and I want to save some time. So if you decide you want more, give me a wave. We can do that. But how can poetry enrich your life as a human ecologist? Poetry cultivates our curiosity, our sense of surprise, the interior lives of our imaginations, and our stories. It helps us tend and name whatever strikes us in the living world. Where do we encounter poetry? The package of poems you're reading this week offers some answers. Wendell Berry finds poetry in a sycamore tree and in the dark. Elizabeth Bishop finds it in a dirty old filling station with a doily on the porch behind the pumps. Josephine Dickinson finds it helping to slaughter a lamb. Louise Gluck finds it in a room made of memory. Levertov finds it in a clogged spring, Merwin in the gift of a plum. Birds at dawn, arrowheads on a trail, a kid's computer game, bathtubs, a boiled egg. The poet tries to praise the mutilated, beautiful, always specific world. It's not the subject that poetry praises, because poets also rant and curse and rail. It's the act of being moved enough to write a poem and then writing it, returning to the world for someone to find again. A poem can hold what Liesl Mueller calls in this poem an unanswered question, and suspend both uncertainty and possibility as part of its creation. An unanswered question by Liesl Mueller. If I had been the lone survivor of my Tasmanian tribe, the only person in the world to speak my language, as she was, if I had known and believed that, for who can believe in an exhaustible language, and if I had been shipped to London to be exhibited in a cage, as she was, to entertain the curious who go to museums and zoos, and if among all those people staring and pointing and laughing and making their meaningless sounds, there had been one thoughtful face, a woman's, say, sympathetic, who might have instinctively understood the one word I could not let die, the indispensable word I must pass through the bars of mutual incomprehension, what word would it have been? We don't know what words and actions our world will ask of us, or how extensive our need for revisions to sustain life will be. The derivation of ecology, as I'm sure you've heard many times now, translates to the study of the house. To me, a poem is a kind of house, a house made of words and space and attention, tended by one human being to hold a moment of value. No subject is forbidden. No subject is forbidden. And in this house, there is always room for silence and reflection. There is always room in this house for silence and for reflection. Always a place to encounter the fleeting wonder and how language can contain it. What words will you come home to? I hope that you will keep a poem around the house. This is part one done. Wild applause would be welcome. I'm just kidding. I realized that those poems are in fact the verbal equivalent of lots of slides, I hope, to see. This is all hearing. It's a lot of language to hear in a world where we have a lot of language to hear. And I realized that I didn't say anything about and I realized this when I was preparing the talk and had printed this part out, that I hadn't said anything about my own relationship to poetry. And I didn't know if perhaps you had questions about anything that I could help with from the talk, or something specific that would bring you so that I could answer some of those questions if you have them. I did bring some poems to read, but I didn't want to do that all through the talk, obviously. I wanted you to hear lots of people. So, are there questions at all? Sean Todd, hey, I have a whole piece here that I didn't read out loud to you. I might if you don't watch it. That's a great, yeah. It's a great question. I think that, and I'm looking right at you, I think that most poets, that's a broad thing to say, but I think poets are moved to go to the page by something in the world that they want to save, as I said here before. I mean, all different kinds of things. I mean, there are so many different kinds of poems. It's like music, you know? You can, I mean, I could have stood up here and played Beethoven, Bach, rap, heavy metal, jazz, blues. Somebody's not going to like something. So what can you do but trust what takes you to the page as the poet? And then as listeners, when we hear the poems or read the poems the first time, we're really just going on the pulse of what it is that we love. And then I think, once we've had that experience with the poem, and it may just be a flicker. I actually thought about you, Chantal, because in this talk, because I didn't open it the way I had thought of it. Did you ever have to study much Tennyson? No. Well, there's a beautiful poem by Tennyson that opens, and I heard it when I was about your age, and I haven't reread it in decades, but it opens, the leaves decay and fall, and after many a summer dies the swan. I thought that was so beautiful when I first heard it. And it's just about language. It didn't mean anything to me. The leaves decay and fall, and after many a summer dies the swan. No idea what it means. But it's a poem by a man who's been given immortal life in mythology, Tithonus, and he's pleading with the person who gave it to him to please let him die. He doesn't want eternal life. I haven't lost the second half of your question because I think the analyzing in quotation marks happens when you're really interested in a poem. When you don't just, you've heard it and you say, oh, I love this poem by Neruda about the socks. Isn't that great? I want to hear that again. Let me read you this poem by Elizabeth Bishop about grief. Let me read you this poem. But then you get interested in how the poem is made. And the poem is made in such an intentional way. It's the most spare form that we have. We all know this. I mean, the novel, wah, the short story, right? But the poet is condensing language, and it's about taking things away. It's leaving the essence. And so every single word matters. And I think that one of the difficulties, of course, is that we live in a time where there are so many words. I mean, how many words have you listened to today? And how many words have you spoken today? And how many words have you attended to today? It's a big difference. It's a big difference. And the poet is interested in how the poem is made. So I think then when and then it's just delicious if you like doing that. I think overanalyzing happens when somebody tries to tell you what a poem means, and you're thinking, I don't think that's what it means. You want to be able to see yourself what's happening in that. So I think delight first, then curiosity, and then investigation of it. It's the same way for those of you who work with, my husband is, he does lots of different things, but he can really come into a building and tell you what's going on in the room. I mean, as far as how the building is made and what's making it stand up and all of these things. On my side of the bed, there's poetry, and on his side of the bed, there's a book called Why Buildings Stand Up. And so he's, but he can do this, and he's very curious about how buildings are made. An architect, a builder, he's not an architect, but somebody who builds, somebody with engines, you're curious about how it's made. And the poet's curious about how it's made. Those of you who, if you're taking classes with Ernie and you're painting, how did you get this color? You're sculpting, you're working with clay, animation. How did you do this? How did you do this? And the poet wants to know how this is made on the page. I had a big, long piece about you and the seal. But somebody better ask a question while I get a drink because my laryngitis is kicking in. I hope that helps, Chantal. Yeah, I hope I addressed it. Yes. It goes all over the place. Are you playing with the music? The words. Yeah. And do you care how it's shaped on the page? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you have any sense of when it's time to stop? So you're listening. You're attending. That's good. Yeah. And it's generated by language. What happened for me when I went past the whale last week? I'll read this. Does that help? Yeah. I mean, you have to trust that. You totally have to trust that because there are 80 zillion kinds of poems. There are so many kinds of poems. And they're so wonderful. And it's just, I mean, I don't know what's in your music case. I've got a lot of different kinds of music in my music case. Really, a lot. And it really, there are times I need certain kinds of music and other times that it would be like rubbing sandpaper over my skin. So, and I think poetry is the same. I mean, I've got a lot of poetry. And I really hope you'll have a library of it in your house. I hope I can find. Give me 1 second here with all this paper. Okay, anyway, this is a paraphrase. Some of you were there when Sean Todd was cutting up that whale by the skeleton and the skull. I went past that, and my mind was immediately filled with language. Instantly. I mean, I was walking on my way to class. Here was this, and I'll give you some of the language that came into my mind. Simultaneously was seeing this great creature cut up on the tables. Slosh, slime, slippery, organs, glisten, creature, lost. The words were like that. I don't know if that's the same kind of experience, but I think it's kind of interesting that the poet is a person that, and I thought, well, Sean Todd's probably not thinking all those things because he's cutting up the darn thing, right? And somebody else might go over and be really curious. I mean, one of the great things, and I wanted to say this to my colleagues, to Ken and to Rich and to Elmer and to Drew and to Colin, and Sean. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to compare these angles of going at human ecology, because looking at that whale, I thought, is anybody else going by this whale and just having all these words come into their mind? But I was the same when I was a little kid. Just any places I was taking a walk, words were happening in my mind simultaneously. It's a really interesting thing about the image and the word. The poet Evan Boland says, images are not ornaments, they are truths. Now that's another whole way of thinking about the image. They are truths. So, yeah, Colin. Mm. I couldn't ask Drew, do you have any thoughts about the image part of that? That why we'd still keep doodling with the images, but we wouldn't necessarily just play with words in the same way? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question because I think it's something about how maybe it's something about how we're wired in some way, because the person who really does see things with images, or the kid that's already beating like this, keeping time with things early on, that kid's already listening to sound and maybe wants to take up the drums as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really takes you back to how you learned to read. Were you read to as a kid, and what was happening in your house with, what was happening in your house with language? How was language being used in your house? And that's everything from how much profanity is in the house to if it's a calm, quiet house. It's really your original relationship with language. And maybe some of us just, yeah. And then when you add reading on top of it, yeah, Sean Todd. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah. Orwell. Amazing. Amazing.
Partly what John is getting at is that words also are sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you sound those sounds in your head as you say them. And it made me wonder, when we read the Deloach and when we did the Neruda, I wonder, did Deloach write this poem in Polish?
He wrote it Polish, but he was the fellow translator of that poem.
About that, but also, insofar as poetry is also sound.
Yeah.
How important is it? How important is the language to music?
Hmm.
How is it changed by changing the language?
It's, some of you know I taught in Shanghai for 2 years. I was there from 84 to 86. And while I was there, the Russian poet Yevtushenko came. It's, all of you know that in countries of oppression and dictatorships and where censorship is severely practiced, people turn out for poetry readings like you would not believe. They pack stadiums to hear poetry. They pack stadiums because the word is forbidden. I'm always amazed when I see the football games on here. I think, you would never get that many people at a poetry reading in this country, no matter who was reading. You could have all the poets in the United States reading, and you'd still never have that many people showing up at one poetry reading. It's really wild. Yevtushenko came while I was there, and I went to the reading. And so, of course, he's reading in Russian. I actually have a copy of the poem one of the poems of his that I totally love that I brought here. He's reading in Russian to a group of Chinese people, and it's being translated into Mandarin. I'm sitting there completely rapt, listening to Yevtushenko. I don't speak Russian. My Mandarin was pretty basic. And it was the timbre, one of you used that in one of your pieces of writing. It was the timbre of the voice and Yevtushenko's astonishing presence on the stage, tall, lean, blue work shirt, very simple, used to commanding big crowds for people to come and hear him read poetry. And I was completely attending. I have no idea what he said. Now, what was I watching? I was watching a voice, I was watching a presentation, I was watching, how many things was I listening to and watching? Because there is that. It's really an interesting question, because when I went by that whale, I thought, or did I think? I don't know, Rich, you can help me with that. Was I thinking? I don't know if I was thinking. The words came on my mental screen. It was slosh, slick, slippery, organ. These words were just like wah, wah, wah. And I wasn't naming anything in any biological way, very precisely, but slosh, slippery, glisten, right there. So maybe it's something about, I don't know if it's how we're wired with that. And I was thinking, Barbara Kingsolver has a great piece about, thanks to a student who brought me back to this. She has a great piece just about how children, she's got the baby in the background, and of course, there's nothing like having a baby in the house to have the baby making poetry. Babies love poetry. They're just putting words together, just sounds together, and you can just go into any house and you will see it. They're totally onto it. Like, well, you could just go on and on with that. So I'm so sorry. I feel as if I did not make good eye contact with the balcony at all, and I really believe in eye contact, and I apologize for that. But between this and the floor, I really am sorry, because it's something I really try to cultivate with my own students all the time. But is there anything from anybody up there? Are you okay? They're okay. All right. Yes. That's a good question. I think it's a courtesy of attention. I'm appalled at the lack of eye contact in our society. Look at me looking right at you. I'm appalled. It's about attending to each other. I mean, I just think it's rude to not look at the person you're talking to. That's just a personal belief. I'm not saying that about anybody else. But, I mean, if I'm talking to you, I want to talk to you. I want to see you. I want to hear what you have to say. I don't even on the telephone at home. I sit down and I listen to the person I'm talking to. And I'm not saying that as prescriptive behavior or some kind of superior thing. I just really, this quotation of Simone Weil's, absolute attention is prayer, is a very big one in my life. When do we pay absolute attention? I just think it's fascinating because individually we each do it. But when? When? When you're putting your child to bed at night? When you're polishing your toenails? When you're frying your fish? I mean, we do pay absolute attention, but when do we pay absolute attention? And to what? How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. Annie Dillard. Another big quotation of mine. I mean, mantra quotations. Yeah. Yeah, it's also because you're trying to be exact about the world and what you see. I mean, I spent a long time trying to figure out the name of a color. You know, it's right this season right now when the light is this amazing, amazing gold right now. I mean, you go outside these days with the leaves just so golden, so beautiful, with the reds and the yellows and everything. And there's a quality to the light when it's coming through those leaves. So beautiful. I kept saying, what is the name for that kind of light? What is the name? And I was doing all different kinds of poetry workshops around the state at the point that I was really investigating this. And I don't mean that I was thinking about it every second or anything like that, but I was thinking, there's a word for this kind of light. And then I was down at Haystack, which is a very, very beautiful place, and I was leading a workshop down there, and one of the people in the workshop said, oh, it's like marmalade. And I went, that's exactly what it's like. It's marmalade light. Now, if you know what marmalade looks like, that beautiful, clear, yellow, orange, and how you can just shine right through it, it is marmalade light right now. And I was so grateful to this person. And that kind of attention. It's also you want the names of things. I had a poem here that I didn't read by Patty Ann Rogers, who was here, I don't know how many years ago she was here, a while. She has, and I can read it to you if you want, but she has this wild, sexy, wonderful poem called The Hummingbird, a Seduction. And it's all about going into being a hummingbird and how she would make love if she were a hummingbird. It's a wild poem. And the story that I've heard about Patty Ann Rogers, and I've met her, talked with her, you know, she's a very diminutive, modest-looking, smart woman. And she stood up there and read this poem, which is so sexy. And she just brought the house down, you know? It's like, people are just like, oh, really? They were not quite expecting that. So that's Patty Ann Rogers, The Hummingbird, a Seduction. I could do it, but anyhow, it's 20 of. I don't know what we need to do. Read the hummingbird poem? I will. It's so great. It's so great. All right. I mean, really, it's like one of these poems that kind of makes your heart go like this, Drew. You might have to come prop me up at the end of it. The Hummingbird, a Seduction by Patty Ann Rogers, who's done a ton. I mean, she's the person who really, I'm looking at Sean Todd again, she really knows the natural world, and she knows the names of things in the natural world. And Patty Ann Rogers is the one who says to the poet, you have to read, she would love this in terms of ecology, read deeply in a subject that has nothing to do with poetry. In other words, she's not at all for the English major MFA, just go get your little degree in poetry person. She's like, read something completely away from the field because it will make your vocabulary richer. It will give you other metaphors. It will give you a different way of looking at the world. The Hummingbird, a Seduction. I think she really looked at the hummingbirds. If I were a female hummingbird, perched still and quiet on an upper myrtle branch, in the spring afternoon. And if you were a male, alone in the whole heavens before me, having parted yourself for me, from cedar top and honeysuckle stem and earth down, your body hovering in mid-air, far away from jewelweed, thistle, and bee balm. And if I watched how you fell, plummeting before me, and how you rose again and fell with such mastery that I believed for a moment you were the sky, and the red-marked bird diving inside your circumference was just the physical revelation of the light's most perfect desire. And if I saw your sweeping and sucking performance of swirling egg and semen in the air, the twisting, weaving vision of red petal and nectar and soaring rump, the rush of your wing in its grand confusion of arcing and splitting, created completely out of nothing, just for me. Then, when you came down to me, I would call you my own spinning bloom of ruby sage, my funneling storm of sunlit sperm and pollen, my only breathless piece of scarlet sky, and I would bless the base of each of your feathers and touch the tine of string muscles binding your wings and taste the odor of your glistening oils and hunt the honey in your crimson flare, and I would take you and take you and take you deep into any kind of nest you ever wanted. Now I ask you. Does she know about the hummingbird? And wouldn't you like to make love with Patty Ann Rogers? I mean, really, this is a woman who has paid attention to the process and has given it to us in words in such an amazing way. It's a poem about praising the natural world. It is praise of the natural world, and it is also complete attention to the natural world. She's got the language right. She knows the names of the pieces of the hummingbird and how it does it. So, Mary Oliver also says, and she's by, it's funny, when I was putting the talk together, I was thinking, I don't want people to think that I'm just a Mary Oliver person, because I'm not. I like Mary Oliver, and I like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of other poets. But one of the things that Mary Oliver says is that the poet is the person who can spend half the morning putting the comma in and taking the comma out. And if you are not a poet, that sounds like a really dopey way to spend a morning. It sounds like truly a waste of a morning. But think about what you pay attention to. Because if you really pay attention to something, whether it's waxing your car or waxing your skateboard or the inside of your backpack, or I don't know what you pay attention to, but you pay attention to it. And Oliver says it will make a difference, that comma, half the morning. And it's really true. If you write poetry, you can spend half an hour. Oh, I should put the comma in. No, I'm going to take it out. So it takes a lot to do it. William Carlos Williams says that men, I am hoping he includes women too, die every day for the news that is in poetry. That we don't have it, that we don't have it, that we miss this news. And I really wonder sometimes when we look around at the society about our imaginations and our ability to be nourished by our imaginations in a very simple way. Just words on a page as nourishment. And poetry can give you that nourishment. It's great. You only need something this big to travel with. I always have a poem in my pocket. It's company. You never know when you're going to get in a traffic jam. Emily Dickinson's in my front seat. That's the truth. Do you dare see a soul at white heat? I mean, really, doesn't she terrify you? Do you dare see a soul at white heat? What is she saying? I felt a funeral in my brain. I mean, you get her in 7th grade or something, and maybe you get it, maybe not. But man, when you start going with her, she's a mystic. I felt a funeral in my brain. Really, you did? Wow. Bring me the hummingbird, please. Okay. All right. Okay, I think that's enough, yeah? Okay. Thank you very much.